La la. Hello peeps and welcome back to Project Hospital. Welcome back to Campaign 3, where we have been looking into wards more in depth than before, which is causing an awful lot of problems in other areas of the hospital, so we're going to have to ignore a lot of error messages until we get to those areas. However, in the last episode we did cover wards in detail, the different types of wards, the patients on them, the staff that work in them, but I thought we would take a bit of a deeper look at ward nurses, because there's different types of ward nurses, and look at their allowed roles and this sort of business. What is this? What we don't know which it is, eh? Okay, X-ray seems to be very, very busy at the moment. So I have, since last episode, made it so that all the wards across these three departments, the regular and the high dependency unit, have been optimized a little bit better than the standard that they had before. There's this performing issue again that seems to be a member of staff bugging out, so Jane currently is having a few issues. We don't have enough stretcher nurses at the moment, because what we have done is we went through our nurses and we have set one nurse on these three departments during the day to patient care only, and we've also done the same for evening as well. So patient care as an allowed role is all about taking care of patients that are on the wards. And that's entirely what it is about. So Jane here, she is on general surgery, so she looks after the general surgery wards and the patients that are on them, and she does various different roles. She will administer medicine to patients that are on the ward that need it. She will check on the patients that are currently on the ward, make sure that they're all okay. And if there is a food tray available in the nurses' station from which she operates, she will also deliver food to these patients as well. And you can see that even though she doesn't have patient transfers switched on, in an emergency situation she will grab a stretcher and move a patient off the ward to another department, but only in really dire situations. Hopefully we will be able to resolve our stretcher problems so that she won't need to do that, because we've been trying to find ways of making sure that ward nurses remain as close to the ward as possible at all the times. And of course, with the stretcher problems, Jane is doing something rather urgent in that area. But you can see here that we've actually put a nurse's station right on the ward, and then she looks after both these wards. So you can see here, this is actually a nurse's station. That's what's so great about this game, is that you can put these things right in there. We've even got toilets on these wards. So even though they're not actually been listed as restrooms, they are just small little rooms actually inside and part of the ward. They are frequently used by patients that are on the ward that need the toilet, and by the staff that works on the ward, and even sometimes staff like janitors and that, if they're near the toilet, will just use it for convenience. So in this nurses' station, and we know it's a problem transferring them. So the smallest a nurse's station can be is 3x4, and you can see that we've absolutely taken advantage of that here. And to make we want Jane and all of our ward nurses to be as happy as possible. So first of all, we need to give her the equipment in order for her to do her job successfully, and that is going to be a PC, which needs a desk and a chair. She needs the medicine cabinet because she delivers medicine, so that's an absolute must. And then the optional meal tray, which I absolutely recommend. You don't have to put one in, but without it she will not feed the patients. And then the patients, while they will come to the vending machine and a drinks machine and deal with their hunger as best as possible, it will never be done very well or for very long. They'll tend to be upset about it. The best option is to have the ward nurse, the patient care nurse, with a meal tray. It absolutely is the best option. So I highly recommend that. But so that she can look after her own hunger, we've also put in a fridge and a coffee maker here, so that she can look after her own needs when she needs to. And you can see here, out of her satisfaction, there's actually standing lunch there, which is a plus. So you would think that not being able to sit down and eat her lunch would be a problem, but actually it turns out for a lot of members of staff, not having somewhere to eat is better. They prefer to just stand and eat it and then get on with work, and it actually comes as a plus. She's now lost all of her modifiers. She's been so far away from the ward for so long, she's got a bit blue. Although actually it looks like she has perhaps dealt with some of her needs while she's been away, so that's good. She hasn't quite made it back to the ward yet. So, but having them on the ward, that means that she's close by. Her needs can be dealt with here more often than they're not, and so she very rarely leaves, which means she can attend to a lot more patients. And what's great about patient care nurses is that they level up really quickly when they focus on this job. Everything that they do, every time they check on a patient, every time they deliver medicine, every time they deliver food, they gain XP, which means that she became a nurse specialist really quite quickly. So that's fantastic. Well done, Jane. Now, what about a couple of traits? The best traits, I would say, for a ward nurse to have, if you can get them, is going to be the nice staff trait, which is like a little heart. And that means that every time she interacts with a patient, they come away with the mullet of nice staff, which is a plus. It helps increase their satisfaction. We don't have that with Jane. We do have that for some of the others, but not with Jane. However, because she is a nurse specialist, she also gives the professional care plus satisfaction here, which is absolutely fantastic. I think we've broken surgery, and I think I know why we've broken it as well, and we'll get there. We'll get it sorted. It is a nurse issue, I think. So you can see at the moment she is checking patients. So she levels up quite quickly because she focuses solely on looking after these patients. Another trait, I think, as well, that's quite good for a ward nurse. I forget specifically what it's called, but it allows them to reveal hidden symptoms that may have not been found just yet, that they're quite good at doing that. So that could be another good trait for a ward nurse. Probably the best couple that you can have. And then another good thing to note is, I would say it's always worth having a couple of stretchers, maybe more if you can fit them in, actually on the ward, because we'll get to stretcher nurses a bit later, but they tend to grab stretchers from the ward or the diagnosis area. So I would say if you can get some stretchers straight on here, the better. And what we're going to do, because I've messed around with these wards, this corridor is actually now completely useless. So what I don't really want people using them. They've been sort of rendered useless, and we've noticed that she was running around here trying to grab a stretcher. Let's I've seen them do that. Let's get rid of these stretchers. There we go, because we have them on the ward. She doesn't need to run away from it. So yeah, we've given her own area to work from, and then we can see exactly how busy she gets during her shift, how exhausted she gets, and if she'll ever need any more support. But it is amazing how many patients on a ward one nurse can deal with. It really, really is. You know, she can deal with quite a big ward with quite a lot of people on it, all on her lonesome, which is fantastic. So, yes, that's these wards. Now, there's a different type of ward nurse. Actually, I tell you what, the ICU is very similar when it comes to ward nurses. So let's actually have a look at them right now before we get to the slightly more complicated emergency ones. So on the ICU, we can see they've put the nurses station. In fact, they've got two, but all of our nurses are right here. Here they are. So let's look at our daytime nurses and just sort them out. So we can see here that actually both these nurses are not particularly great at patient care, but we will move, we'll make Barbara patient care, and we'll make Thomas here transfers. They are both terrible members of staff, which is not ideal. And then the nighttime members of staff, she has this, so we'll make her patient care, and we'll make her transfers, because she actually has, look, fast. She's a fast mover, so she's actually really perfect for transferring patients around. She's also really cheap to employ, and she doesn't have many qualifications. She's perfect for the job. So they operate in pretty much exactly the same way. Actually, it's nighttime shift, isn't it? It's the nighttime shift. So Nancy here is the nurse now for patient care for those that are on the ICU. And we covered the ICU in a little bit of detail in the last episode. But yeah, she's pretty much the same. The ICU is a big old ward, a very, very heavily equipped ward. So they're pretty much the same as the nurses that would be on the wards over here. The nurses that are slightly different are the emergency nurses, because of course the wards themselves are a little bit different. So the trauma centre is where our very emergency cases come in. If they're collapsing in the hospital and are dying, or they're being rushed in through an ambulance, they come to the trauma centre. And the nurses that, and it's also the same for the doctors, but the nurses that work on the trauma centre have this trauma stabilization option. Now let's have a look here. So, hang on a minute. We have just one nurse day and night doing everything. Okay, that's worth bearing in mind. Let's see here. So what we might do, she's actually quite good, so we'll leave her like that for the minute, and I'd actually like to take her off. So our nighttime nurse, okay, we'll cover her in a minute, but what we'd like to do is get somebody in who's fairly cheap, that can do transfers for us. Now see, she's very cheap, but she also has slow. She's very, very slow, which, to be honest, when they're moving patients around, is really not what I'm after. This person will do. They're pretty cheap, and what we'll ask him to do is patient transfers only, and we're going to need somebody during the day to actually do patient care. So we're going to ask that these nurses have clinical nurse specialists. We want them to be pretty good at looking after people, and do you know what, we will just grab this lady for now. That will do, and take her off patient transfers. Okay, so here we go. So what is trauma stabilization? So it's an additional role for these particular nurses. So not only do they do patient care, in fact, because they're situated down here, we'll probably take them off patient care, because patient care looks after the ward, but this is the trauma centre. So when a patient is rushed in, say via an ambulance, or if they've collapsed in the hospital and have been rushed in, they need stabilization. And same with the doctors over here. So we can see that this is our lady over here. She has trauma centre as well. We don't want her working on the ward upstairs. We want to make sure that... Okay. There is no doctor in an on-call room emergency with diagnostic role. Okay. Do you have to have at least one? Because upstairs we have the ward for emergency, where we have more doctors. So we have, look, he has diagnostics. He has diagnostics. Maybe he's not qualified enough. If we fire him, and let's employ, it's interesting, let's employ this lady. I wonder if that would do it. Because we don't want doctors and nurses from down here on trauma running upstairs to deal with patients that are not as critical up here. we want the nurses and doctors that are up here to deal with these patients. You know, it's best to keep them working close to where they are, but also we need these doctors and nurses absolutely available, because when somebody is rushed in, they need attention instantly. They cannot wait. So you kind of do want some staff around here pretty much doing nothing but waiting for an emergency to occur. And this is them, right? This is them. We've got a nurse and a doctor, and they are purely set to trauma stabilization, meaning they won't go and diagnose patients, and the nurse here will not go and look after the patients on the ward upstairs. She is just going to stay here and wait for an emergency to come in, so she is instantly ready. And that's she kind of has to do that. So we leave her with just her trauma stabilization on, which means, yeah, okay, she probably won't do a lot. It's a shame. Look, she's got the pleasant staff thing. Oh, there it is. People person reveals hidden perks of people after interacting with them. This here is the best combination for a patient care ward nurse I think you can probably have. So that's worth bearing in mind. She is perfect for the role. So I kind of feel like I might actually move her upstairs. Who have we got up here? So we have, and she's actually very good. We're going to put her on patient, on the trauma stabilization downstairs, because she's quite well skilled. So we're going to do that. So Jessica Green, this is going to be a better way around. Jessica Green, like that. And then, because she's perfect for patient care, we're going to move Brooke here upstairs. Brooke. And what I'm trying to work out is, do we really need transfers down here? Possibly not. Might actually fire him, and we'll see how we get along with that. You know? And we don't want her to have patient care, although she is pretty bad skill-wise. And do you know what we'll do? We'll move Jessica Green over to here, so they're using the same desk. There we go. So yes, trauma stabilization means that they will stick around and only deal with the patients that are being rushed into the trauma center that need stabilizing instantly. And this, I feel, is a good role to have on its own, so that they're not off being busy elsewhere when an emergency rocks up. Which means it sort of spills over a little bit, as you saw, into this ward as well. So this is observation, still emergency department observation. So this tends to be where they go, just to make sure that after they've crashed, that they truly are stable, give them some meds, and work out exactly what department, one of these departments, will best suit the problem that you know is afflicting them. So we have 2 patients currently on this ward. So this one's pretty minor. I don't know why he's in the ward. It's probably a doctor that's working on the clinic that's not too well skilled and hospitalised them for a bit of athlete's foot, which just needs a bit of cream rubbing on it. So they won't be going anywhere. They'll be going home. This lady here, she doesn't actually need to be here. So they're trying to work out whether they are actually dealing with something that would be worth sending her to the orthopedic department for, or if it's just something they can put a bit of numbing ointment on, and they want to x-ray her to find out. But we could just say, hey, go to that department now. We could do. It really doesn't matter. She could be on either. We don't know which one it is. I'm pretty sure, though, if it was this one, they might be able to do a leg cast on this department. Yeah, I don't know. Can they do... Oh, I can't switch it back now. Don't know. They might not be able to do a leg cast actually on the emergency department, so then they would switch her departments once they knew exactly what was wrong with her. So in my experience, the emergency tends to be pretty quiet. So having loads of staff, I've never really found is massively necessary. Okay, this is... We don't have any decent... Can you see here? Both these nurses are not really great at patient care. So I think we will keep Dana here to do patient transfers because she has the fast trait. But I think this lady we might actually fire and get somebody new in to look after the patients on this ward for the day, in the daytime. Let's see here. What do we have? She's slow moving, but she has the nice staff trait. Her rest levels decrease slower, and she's also a germaphobe. Do you know? I think we'll keep her in, and we can always if she's too slow moving, then we can deal with that. But yeah, so needing lots of nurses, I think. Certainly not for me at the moment with this department. There tends to never be that many here. So who is it? It's Brooke that is currently on duty. She was downstairs, so she's making her way upstairs. So that's the only real difference, is when we get to emergency, we have this trauma stabilization. I would say that if you want them working on observation, go with patient care. If you want them working on the trauma center, go with trauma stabilization. And that way you shouldn't have them crossing over and being all crazy for you. So there we are, ward nurses, I would say. We've done traits, and we've covered what would keep them happy on the ward. We haven't incorporated them into these wards over here, but if you'd like to see my sort of perfect ward setup, then do check out the previous episode where I built a ward that I think is about as perfect as you are going to get it for the nurse that works on the department, along with the patients that are actually on the ward as well. So we can see here, if we come back, check out Margaret White on the orthopedic department. She's inspired. Look at that. I don't know what that's come from, if I'm honest with you, what she's been inspired by. Maybe there's something going on with these hidden traits that we don't know about. But nice environment. Just putting a plant on her desk can get you that one. And she's getting to the point where she needs to fill her needs. So there we are. She's going to go and fill her needs, and she's going to not give us the nice example of using everything that we've provided for her. She's gone to the toilet next door. Interesting. It's probably technically closer to her desk than that one is. So she's gone to the toilet. So you can see she's not had to wander across the building to go to the toilet. Also, it's worth putting a hand dryer in every toilet. Otherwise, she would complain that she was unable to dry her hands in the toilet. So while it doesn't give a buff, it avoids a debuffing. But you can see there she now has her needs reduced, but she is hungry. So we've provided her with a coffee cup and a fridge. No, she's going to go and check on patients for the moment. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. So the other type of nurses that are vitally important for a ward are absolutely your transfer nurses. Transfer nurses are probably one of the busiest nurses in the whole place. They do not stop. And we can see here that we have 2 transfer nurses on the orthopedic department, and I think at the moment I have 2 transfer nurses day and night on all of these departments, and it is not enough. And we can see here that, you know, he's fairly unhappy. His needs are becoming critical, and it's also the same here for Christopher. You know, his needs are falling because he's not getting the spare time, the free time to deal with his needs. We've already noted that a really great trait for stretcher nurses or patient transfer nurses, this is the allowed role. They literally just move patients from A to B all of the time. That is all they do. So given how much walking they do, having the fast trait so that they move around quickly is really, really good. And when their rest levels get very, very low, they will move much slower. So it's really quite important that you try to give your stretcher staff, your patient transfer nurses, plenty of time to deal with their needs. And at the moment we can see that isn't happening here. That simply isn't happening. We need to try and make their jobs as easy as possible. So what I have noticed is they never take stretchers from the nurse's station, where their desk is, where they work from. They will go to the department that the patient is currently on, that needs moving, and then grab the nearest stretcher from there. Hence, there are stretchers on the wards, because the ward and the diagnostic rooms are the go-between walk that these members of staff do the most, and they will occasionally take patients to surgery, of course, but most of the time they transfer patients between the ward and diagnostic and the ward. So having stretchers in those two locations, I would say, is an absolute must. And they always return the stretcher after they've used it, so they won't go to another patient in the ward who needs to be moved. They will first of all return the stretcher, and then they'll take on a new job. And we can see here that Charles returned that stretcher, and he is now immediately going to get another one. No time for him to take a break. He's so exhausted. He needs the toilet. He's starving. He's a very unhappy boy. And he's slowly getting tired. And when this goes below 2 stars, he will move very, very slowly. I thought I had removed these stretchers. Clearly there are some here. The diagnostic room. The layout of this hospital has got really bad because I've blocked up a corridor. So it's possible that it's one of the patients from here, which means that technically this stretcher is the closest, but because I've done something terrible with the layout, it's not gone very well at all. It's very inefficient setup, so you can see how quickly we could have made his journey much shorter, because he'll probably now go all the way to the high dependency unit. Oh no, he didn't. And you can see here, is there enough free nurses to transport patients? There really isn't. So what we want to do is keep employing nurses, really, until we can see that Charles or whomever we're following has enough time to deal with their needs. I mean, that's it, really. So we've currently got these two. So now, who's good for specifically moving stretchers? What I would say is that nurses that are doing patient transfers and nothing else gain no experience. So the best thing to do is to find dirt cheap nurses with not much qualifications in anything. Now, she tends to be late to work, ho hum, but we're getting a bit desperate, so we're going to employ her, and I think we will get a 4th in as well. She's pretty cheap, but she's slow. That was a waste of money. Oh my god, it's getting expensive trying to hire them. There we go. So we will then also employ her. So we now have these, and they will probably instantly have work to do, will they? No. Well, she did. But it seems that Jessica is idle, which is fantastic, because then it means that Charles and Christopher here should be able to start to relax and take some breaks to deal with themselves. Whereas Mary was straight into more work. Jessica here is relaxing, so she can take the next job, giving Charles and Christopher time to recharge. So 4 stretcher nurses on orthopedy. So between this episode and the next episode, I'll probably up all the where's she going? Getting a stretcher. There you go. Says another job's come in. During the next episode, I will make sure that all the departments have enough stretcher only nurses. But I thought it would also be nice to design a room specifically for these patient transfer nurses, rather than having one nurses station with all the different types of nurses. I want to try and make it so that they already walk a lot, right? They travel all over the hospital all of the time, and it means that as soon as they need to take a break, they've got to walk somewhere. So I wanted a nurse's station that is purely built for stretcher nurses, the patient transfer nurses, that has a toilet and all the food, some entertainment, a television. So it pretty much has a common room right inside the office with them. Again, we probably won't be using it in this particular hospital, but nice for me to have it saved and start utilizing it when I come to do a sandbox hospital, knowing that it will make their lives so much easier once they return to their desk. If they can deal with their needs right where they are without having to walk across the hospital again, is fantastic. I mean, that's surely the way to do it. I think so. So let's go and see what I built. I'm wrecking the money situation in this hospital doing all of this, but I'm sure you guys don't mind. So let's get rid of this a minute. It wasn't going up the floors. Here we go. So how much does this room cost? I don't know. I can see here it's called stretcher nurses. And this is where I demonstrated the wards. But this is the room that I have created for my stretcher nurses. There you go. So you can see here, I've provided quite a lot of desks, because you end up needing quite a few, to be honest. And so this will give us 5 transfer nurses in the day and night. And you can see right here, they've got a toilet. They've got a little kitchen with a coffee cup and a fridge. They've got a hi-fi for entertainment. They've got everything they need right here. You can see there are no stretchers because, as mentioned, they do not take stretchers from their office and go and pick up a patient. They'll go to where the patient is, or they'll get the nearest stretcher to where the patient is, and the patient tends to be on the ward, or they tend to be on diagnostics, occasionally surgery. So that tends to be where you're going to want the majority of your available stretchers. No point putting them in here. I tried it. They never use them. So this, moving forwards in my sandbox hospital, when I build one, will be the office I set up purely for transfer nurses, and they absolutely love it. I've tested it out. They absolutely love it, and I cannot wait to demonstrate that in my sandbox hospital. And it just means that you can better put your nurses where you want them, because that will leave one type of nurse in our nurses station, which is going to be the surgery nurses, which I believe are going to be best to set up, you guessed it, right by surgery, which is not the best place to have your patient transfer nurses, because they do sometimes take patients to and from surgery, but most of the time they're going between these 2 rooms. Most of the time that's where they're going. So you're going to want your patient transfer nurses station near these 2 rooms, near these, not near surgery. So it felt best for me to separate them out from my surgery nurses. Indeed. So I hope that's covered everything for you guys. And as I say, what I'll do before the next episode is I will sort out my patient transfer nurses across all departments to make sure that there are enough, because we're getting a lot of long waits messages at the moment, and that's because there simply isn't enough nurses transporting patients around. But yeah, so we're really hitting hard with the ward aspect of things, and we're starting to move away from the ward and looking at things supporting the ward, like our patient transfer nurses. And then I shall see you in the next episode with probably something more surgery based. Thank Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. If you did, please hit that like button. As long as you are here, why not take your first step on the path to total coolness by supporting me via Patreon. The cooler you are, the harder I work, which means even more SHIZWAH.